for Parallel Minds, we ultimately wanted to create an empathetic experience where a user could go in and truly feel what it feels like to experience hallucinations, both visually and auditory, in terms of a psychosis patient.
Where am I? Journal entry 1. I got in a car accident yesterday. I went to the doctor and he diagnosed me with a rare case of organic psychosis.
So in Parallel Minds, we are trying to educate people about the problems or dealing with psychosis in a way that is very realistic, but yet tries to incorporate some of the stuff that we find entertaining in video games. So the whole experience is in an asylum. We aren't necessarily trying to scare you or like spook you, but make you uncomfortable and like really try to get in the mindset of someone who is dealing with psychosis.
So our goal is to create a linear-based narrative with auditory hallucinations that tell a story through the medium of journal entries with audio interference that makes it hard to concentrate on these journal entries. In terms of the controls for our project, we chose to use Oculus Rift as moving the body around because our experience takes place in a wheelchair. And then we also use a controller, and the controller is what you use to actually move your physical self in the virtual environment.
Journal entry 7. Things are starting to happen that I can't explain.
The Oculus Rift is actually it's very interesting because it's sort of a relatively new medium. It definitely allows for the affordance of putting someone in the experience, so making them very immersed into this environment that we've created.
For our physical rig, for our environment that we want to place the user in, we've actually created a mini psych ward. So we have a wheelchair that the user sits in, and then we wheel them into our rig, and then we put the Oculus on and we put the headset on, and this will immerse the user even more. As the experience takes place inside of a wheelchair, the user is sitting in a wheelchair experiencing our game as well. For our immersion types, we went with sensory and imaginative. In terms of sensory emotion, we went with visual and audio. Like I said earlier, we have audio hallucinations, which really help drive the point home. For visual, we also have a few visual hallucinations that happen in the environment. We have the wall that closes in, we have the flower that drops to the ground, we have a shelf that moves by itself, and we found that these were also very effective in the cases that we researched. For imaginative-based immersion, we created an environment where the user could truly imagine themselves in a psych ward, and we wanted to match this in our physical rig as well by creating our own miniature version of a psych ward and placing the user in a wheelchair. So building Parallel Minds was an iterative process with extensive testing to ensure the movement around the world felt good and didn't leave the user feeling sick. When using the Oculus Rift, it's hard to get the movement feeling just right, so we did a lot of tweaking with the movement and turning speeds to create the most comfort. Our story also went through various revisions, and ultimately the story we ended up with felt the most accurate to our research with psychosis patients. Our auditory hallucinations were created accurately with our research in mind. We pulled audio from the internet that was supposedly accurate to what experiencing this disorder feels like.
Journal entry 16.
We think it was very effective at communicating our intentions of creating an empathetic experience with someone dealing with this mental illness.
No, I think it worked. It was really disorienting, which was like obviously the point. Like obviously there's going to be like visual like confusion in like a VR setting. Where you're gonna like be in like a physical space that's changing, and that's gonna be kind of like messing you up. The addition of like the audio also kind of like distorting and layering over itself was, that helped with that too, because it kind of made it seem like instead of this like physical world that's against you, it's almost like it's yourself that's against you.
When the walls were like closing in, that was pretty freaky. It was very immersive.
Surround sound does actually felt pretty scary, so I would say that does bring into effect on making it more realistic.
The medium of virtual reality is a really exciting one because it's so recent, and with the rise of consumer level head-mounted displays like the Oculus Rift and the HTC Vive, we're really just starting to truly understand what we can do with these devices and to create a form of immersion and empathy that is unmatched in other forms of media today.